O nobly born, welcome to Tibetan Book of the Dead, the final chapter. It's been a long ass journey, but I've really enjoyed it and learned quite a bit. And I'm glad that we've been able to do it together. Jake and I were just talking about how reading this kind of shit thing on your own can be kind of a slog.
Daunting. Yeah.
And that's why we have this book club so that we can get through these immense, crazy texts together and like benefit from each other's insights.
It's gonna fuel all when I read the Timothy Leary what's it, psychedelic guide to
Yeah.
the Tibetan Book of the Dead a
Yeah,
lot
Jake
as
bought
well.
a rare copy of that a
Yeah,
couple
I
of weeks
showed it
ago.
in the episode a couple of episodes ago. But
Yeah.
so I know this is gonna fuel my understanding of that book a lot more as well, which is gonna really be good.
So yeah, I guess in summation, to round things up, the exploration of the death process that we go through in the Bardo Thodol kind of feels like falling into a haunted house. It's sort of like an Alice through the looking glass situation. um, that's sort of the feeling I get, especially at the very end when of the audiobook that we've been listening to, when the prayers are sort of summed up and there's this like one big long prayer. um that was the part that resonated with me the most, because I felt like that prayer kind of summed up all of the themes of the Bardo Thodol, from karma to looking at one's shadow to the pitfalls that sort of keep us trapped on the wheel of samsara, from greed to jealousy,
Mm.
to attachment, to all of those different aspects that have sort of been explored. It's quite profound, but also I find it quite an alarmist view of the afterlife. It seems kind of daunting, and like there's also a little bit of misogyny twinged in there as well at the end. There was also the part where it was like it's better to be born as a man or some shit, because
It's just being honest, I guess.
just being
Just
honest,
breaking it down.
I happen to enjoy being female, so I took offense. But yeah, I really sort of enjoyed the experience so far. What about you?
I thought it was good. I thought there was like one bit in there that did like catch me out. That was just sort of like I think we've been sort of making like trying to find reasons as to why people like Madame Blavatsky and Crowley and all these people were like quite interested in this book.
Hmm.
When they're deemed like quite bad, evil like people or occultists in many ways,
Really?
whatever. Aleister
Yeah,
Crowley,
Crowley, yeah,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
Blavatsky, how
Well, maybe not
so?
Blavatsky so
Well, I
much,
guess
but like
people say she's a Nazi, but that's not true. But
yeah, but
yeah.
like there was like one little line that oh, and the secret passage for people with bad karma shall be like unveiled or something like through this process. I was just like, what? So this is like this is why loads of people like dodgy people are kind of into this
What do you
because
mean?
there's like some like right at the very end of the book there's just like oh, and there's the secret little passage for people with bad karma so you can like navigate and do all of this stuff anyway, so don't worry
Yeah.
about it.
I mean, that is one aspect of the Bardo Thodol that made it, I guess, popular in Western culture, which is what you're talking about, is the
I
fact
was
that
gonna
it,
say, so how Catholic?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It
exactly.
acts as like a cheat sheet to death in a way. Like, here's like the secret formula.
It doesn't matter if you've been bad because now you found this, and we've got the secret passage, so your karma's all clean, dude. Don't worry about it. It's just sort of a little bit like, oh, okay. I mean, I don't know. That kind of like undermines a lot of the kind of a point of living a good life and
Hmm.
sort of building good karma to escape and to have the knowledge to then escape like the
The
process.
cycle of
That's kind of
misery.
what
Yeah.
it talks about as well.
Yeah.
Is sort of like the great yogis and wizards and like
Beings.
super knowledgeable people will be able to kind of just like retain all of that wisdom and use it to guide them through the bardo and then escape, or use the secret fucking passage if you're a cheeky bastard. It's just like, what? How the fuck can that be? Doesn't make sense.
There's the secret passageway in the chocolate factory all along.
I was gonna
There
say
is, that's where Willy
life's
Wonka goes.
contra code.
Yeah, so how about you? Let's go to Jay George, since you've been here every single week. Well
No, I
done.
haven't.
You get
Actually, there was 1 week my internet went down, but yeah.
well, you've been
So
our
that
most frequent. You've been our most frequent attendee, so you get the golden Bardo badge.
Dialing in
yeah.
from Brazil as well. You're allowed one internet slip up pass.
Yes, you. Well,
Yeah.
okay.
How about you? What's been what's your summation of everything that you've sort of gone in?
Well, my gripes with the book, beside like the more misogynist parts by like more at the end, and in fact, it's it kind of has like a negative view of earthly life. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think it's really fascinating, like how even this like weird state between life and death, it gives everyone, there's a view that everyone, even the worst person, gets a chance of redemption.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
That
yeah.
is, but I don't think everyone could really have like the wisdom and the patience and like the clarity of the mind to just go through the light and like not be distracted by all those things like chocolate fountains.
I mean, I like the idea of all of redemption for everyone in that sense. I think that that's kind of a very beautiful idea. I mean, you even see that in things like esoteric Christianity and Kabbalah. Um, but I agree with you that it does take sort of a dismal view towards life. At least that's kind of the vibe I get from it. Um, and also states of being that like we don't necessarily have insight into. It just sort of assumes that they're negative, like the animal state, for instance.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that was
uh,
one. Yeah,
the
sorry,
animal
go ahead.
state part, there is a film by Robert Bresson called O Hazard Baltazar that focuses on the life of it tries to tackle the themes of human cruelty through the eyes of a donkey. It's a very, very, very beautiful film.
Oh yeah, I heard about this.
Just try
Yeah.
to, yeah, really recommend.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. But yeah, it's sort of it sort of has a lot of amazing psychological insights. I think insights into the nature of consciousness, insights into what it feels like to be disembodied, which is why I think it ties into things like the psychedelic experience and sort of metaphysical experiences in general. But the cosmology element of it isn't something that I necessarily fully
I
buy.
don't know. Is
But
that
it still has an archetypal resonance to like the fact that you were able to map Willy Wonka onto it. Alice in Wonderland is also another one that could be mapped. There's so much that could be mapped onto the Bardo Thodol. So there is sort of an archetypal resonance, but I don't necessarily buy all of the like cosmology that surrounds it, I
I think I
guess.
said this in like the second or third week, but like it's like Psycho. Like I've seen Psycho referenced so many fucking times through Family Guy and like every other like pop cultural thing ever, that by the time it came to me to watch Psycho, I thought it was the most underwhelming and kind of not. I'm not saying that Tibetan Book of the Dead is underwhelming, but it's really like all of the good lessons that you can get from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I feel like writers like Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary have both written in much plainer English for you to like the Chapel Perilous is the Bardo,
Mm.
and the way that Robert Anton Wilson talks and writes about that is so much easier for you to comprehend
Well, as a
than
modern person, I think there's something magical about going directly
oh
to the
definitely
source
definitely
of like ancient knowledge and wisdom in that sense. It's not necessarily meant to be accessible necessarily to like modern 21st century audience in that sense. And I don't disagree that like it's important to be able to feel connected to what you're imbibing in that sense, but like I don't fault it in that way because it's like
no, I don't fault it. It's more
ancient
just like that
and
that's my
verbose.
perception of it, because
Hmm.
I've done the rounds, if you know what I mean, before
Hmm.
I've come to the root.
That's true. That is true. It's something that's been very heavily parodied and troped. Um, I don't know. I love seeing that resonance. Like when I was reading it and I recognized portions in it from
Hmm.
things that I had, previously watched or read. I like making those sorts of connections. I don't just see it as like trite or silly or.
It's not saying it's trite. It's more that I like the way it it's more succinct. Like the way that Robert talks about like the Chapel Perilous is exactly most of what you would get without all of the Buddhism dressing essentially
yeah.
from it.
Yeah.
But you get that much more succinctly and like
yeah.
written in English that you can kind of wrap your head around a lot easier than sort of trying to decipher all this stuff through the context of Buddhism, which is probably as a Westerner going to be a pretty foreign religion to you at the end of the day as well.
True.
So that's what I mean.
I think, yeah, I agree in terms of that. People like Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary took the archetypal elements or beats from death process myths like the Bardo Thodol, like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and translated them in a way that like modern,
Exactly.
Western audiences could grasp and understand.
Like the story of Set and Jesus and the parallels and stuff like that, and how basically that was a way of telling the same story but into a new culture and time to which people understand the newer metaphors used within that story rather than the sort of archetypal pagan use of gods and all the other kind of stuff that was going on with the Set version,
One thing I definitely want to do after having read the Bardo Thodol is to look into other death process myths like the Egyptian Book of the Dead and sort of draw parallels between what I've learned here and there. I think that would definitely be a really interesting exercise.
I interrupted. Sid, what do you think of this whole experience of Tibetan Book of the Dead?
Well, as scattershot as a lot of my following was, I still was, revisiting and listening to the chapters each week. I was thinking of rewatching Beau is Afraid now because I feel like a lot of that feels like, diving from the samsara of his pitiful life into, all of the deities, like, and being so repulsed by them and so outwardly, awed in, the most brazen way, and then his inevitable, descent back into the womb was kind of like at the end, where they talk about not being
Wow.
visibly repulsed by the womb, but also not, feeling like it's an inviting place. Whereas he was just like, that's all he desired was to return. And even though he resents his mother, which is obviously kind of like, more of Ari Aster's clear kind of thesis of the movie, was just like, I got mommy issues, obviously, and he's in his anxieties in life in general. But like, I think that was quite an epic in that way. It's kind of a mess of a movie, but like the core of it is still pretty good. But for me, just it was a lot of things I've been tackling just personally and professionally, I guess, really lined up strangely with everything. Because I had talked about it, I think like the first meeting, maybe the first or second meeting. Um, my dad died on the solstice on the 21st of December, right?
So sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I didn't really know how to process it at first because I don't really have a close relationship with him, or I didn't have a close relationship with him. But it's like one of those things where all of a sudden it hits you all at once. Like, I'm just like, I don't really know who this man was anymore. But and then when I was kind of diving into like thinking about, were he to, uh, you know, deal through these states and, confront these deities, like how he would be passaged, through this whole process of the Bardo. And I don't know, it's kind of hard because I don't really feel like that's something that really would have occurred to him. He probably would fear it, although he didn't seem to fear at the end of his life, what was happening to him. I mean, it's cancer. Cancer is the worst, and I mean, I work in oncology now, so I deal with it every day. So it's like I've been so close in my, my actual work, and then outside of that, like just trying to kind of deal with everything that's been going on, and like, I don't know, it was very serendipitous, I guess, to kind of dive into this material and to consider like what I might do when I'm faced with that kind of, that the end, that oblivion, or that, I don't even want to say it's oblivion because that's more of like leaning onto the pessimist side of a reading of this. I think it's more of like embracing this not even a liminal state. It's more of like a ephemeral, um, not. I guess it's kind of like a state of entropy, but I think of it as more of just kind of like this minutia, this well, you're trying to separate the cosmology, but I think there is a massive cosmic element to this extra space where you're inhabiting between when you are kind of at the again the summation at the end, pulling yourself away from the comfort of the flesh, which was also very Cronenberg, which last week you guys actually talked about Crash, in Titan or Titan, I don't know. I enjoyed that, but like talking of the like merging his dream, I think Jay George talked about, like with the mechanical birth, and that being a really good metaphor in that movie, as it was kind of touched on.
It was Apex Triplet, so that said he had a dream of like
was it
helping his mother give birth. Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to that. It was very fascinating. Maybe you mentioned the movie. I think that might have been it. Because
Yeah.
it reminded me of it. I was like, yeah, that was exactly what I thought of. But yeah, very kind of Cronenberg. Maybe not Naked Lunch, but definitely like a Crash or Videodrome kind of. And that also kind of feels like Cronenberg tapping into those states. These. But obviously, I could bring up Lynch. I won't get into Lynch at the moment because I could go on. But I was rewatching Lynch's Dune after Dune Part 2 just came out, obviously. After I finally slept through the first Part 1 of Dune, it was a lot. It was a lot of, it was visually beautiful, but like it felt like a lot of meandering to it was like Spider-Man 2, the Across the Spider-Verse or whatever, where it's like, really? That's where you're going to end it? It feels like it just got started and then it's just over. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, whatever. But yeah, very, very. I feel like Lynch exists in that state of like preparing for the inevitability of the transitioning from this to another. And I mean, we could talk about any of his films or television that he's made and make a lot of connections. But yeah, I just thought it was very timely for us to talk about
Definitely.
this tome. For sure.
Definitely.
I
Definitely.
think Lynch and Hayao Miyazaki see the artistic process as the bardo,
Interesting.
if you know what I mean. Like both of them, I think whenever you hear David Lynch talk about creating cinema and doing art, and same with Hayao Miyazaki, they never talk about it being this like, oh, wondrous, pleasurable, incredible thing. It's sort of like this, oh, I was smoking a cigarette and then the demon spoke to me and the charcoal went like this. And like fucking shit came up. And when Hayao Miyazaki talks about it, it's like, no, it's fucking pain. I'm trying to like get this thing out of my fucking head and I can't get it right. And it's like suffering. It's like not fun.
Mhm.
And that's like the bardo. It's like the transition through like the liminal kind of space towards then the final thing, which is like a transformative process for like you and the ether of like which you exist around or which you're manipulating.
Yeah,
No,
definitely.
you saw Boy and the Heron, right, Jake?
We
I haven't seen
yeah,
it yet.
and
Oh, you
No.
we
haven't? I
know
haven't either.
we know
Oh,
it's
it's
I was
really
about
good. It's really
curious.
good. Trust me.
I
Yeah.
know
It's
that
really
it's
good.
about
It
death,
won
and
the Oscar, so I mean,
yeah, I know that
it's
it's
pretty cool.
about death, and I know that it's very relevant and timely to what we've been discussing. There's been a lot of synchronicities surrounding this book club in general, to be honest. It's been very spooky. Yeah. But that always seems to happen. But and I love it. It's great. I think it's wonderful.
Mhm.
But it's it's one of the key themes that like really stood out to me was the idea of heightened awareness. Your awareness is like heightened because you're disembodied in the bardo and you don't have anything to sort of cling on to. But
Your
it also
tether has been.
yeah, your tether's been cut. And it's similar to the psychedelic process where you have similar experience where you're no longer sort of grounded in
You're not tethered to your body in the way that you're used
Mhm.
to being.
Yeah, but then it also asks you to take that heightened awareness not only into your life, but also into your dreams as well, because it sort of is attempting to awaken you to the fact that your life is a dream, and the more attachments, the more you know, um, you get caught up in the muck of samsara, the harder it is to sort of transcend. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. I think there's a beautiful aspect to the idea of being able to let go and being able to um, detach. But at the same time, I can see how that can become very unhealthy very quickly as well.
I don't know. I kind of
In terms of as a spiritual philosophy or as a guiding principle for like a culture.
I think it's what's necessary for either great works of art or really sort of deep thinking about new ideas
hmm
is that kind of detachment from stuff so that you have free association, so that you're kind of not bound by anything.
True.
And it's sort of figuring out a way to safely navigate that space, I guess. And that's sort of some of the ancient language that is used for like Tibetan Book of the Dead, basically.
Wow. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
updated with Chapel Perilous and other kind of analogies by
hmm
newer writers.
And those are sort of the archetypal beats that are important to kind of grab, regardless of whether or not you agree with the cosmology.
Yeah.
And like you said before, it is like archetypal. Like you brought up Willy Wonka, Alice in
Mhm.
Wonderland. These are sort of Western versions of the Bardo Thodol journey into the underworld, into the unconscious. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Could you say the Little Prince is one as well?
I'd have to think about that.
Because that's kind of like a liminal journey where he
Yeah,
meets loads of deities or
deities,
like archetypal forces.
forces. Yeah, I always thought more about
Then
the Little
grapples
Prince.
with them and then like comes to a great realization at the end. So like I would kind of see that like a similar process as well.
All fairy tales are a journey through
Well,
the
yeah, it is
Bardo
because it
in
is
a
an
way.
archetypal thing. That's
Yeah.
kind of the whole point, right? It's sort of
Yeah.
like it's sort of finding. It's the same thing. You can find it with every religion, and it's nice to sort of get the not cliff notes, but like the essential essence of like what is the moral of the story, if you will.
Definitely.
And that can be applied not only within like death, but if I lost my job at the time that we basically started doing this whole thing, and so like it was super fucking relevant to me in my personal life, like going through all of that shit. If you were kind of like getting a divorce or like going through some other kind of personal stuff, even whatever else it could be, right? It can be related to all sorts of different things. So it's not, or even as I made the parallel just then, like the creative process, right? There's all sorts of
True.
ways in which that Chapel Perilous, that Bardo Thodol, that like transitional, liminal, transformative journey is essential to a final transformation personally.
And then there's also a lot of pain that gets created if you resist it, I guess, which is the other half of what you're saying. Like, and it's the same in the Bardo. Obviously, the more your mind clings and resists, the more you're affected by the winds of karma and the wrathful deities. And then, just as in life, the more you sort of resist the Chapel Perilous moments where you're called to evolve and change, you're sort of creating more pain. The same way your mind is kind of creating the chaos in the Bardo. Yeah, there are lots of profound lessons to be garnered from this weird arcane text full of crazy psychedelic imagery and flashing lights. And it's definitely made me look at other stories in a different way. Like even Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which I want to rewatch, because I haven't seen it in years. The scene where he's freaking them out and he's like, "There's no earthly way of knowing which direction we are going." That kind of feels Bardo-esque to me. Even with the imagery on the walls, and it's like these images of horror and of flashing frightful lights. It definitely feels Bardo-esque, and that film was, obviously, isn't it from the 60s
Early 70s.
or early
I
70s?
think it is 60s. Yeah.
60s or early 70s. And during that time was when these texts were sort of becoming fashionable again among the artistic milieus of the time. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some influence.
I'm pretty sure Roald Dahl was a Oxford grad and stuff. So he would have been around the halls of people that would be reading that stuff and whatever. So I wouldn't be surprised.
If he was like a secret theosophist or something.
Or no, if Willy Wonka, we're not like making a big leap here, but Willy Wonka is like actually
Is
somewhat
actually
inspired by the Tibetan Book of the Dead. That's what I'm saying.
the Lord of Death. Hello. Oh
I've
my
got
gosh,
my friend.
it's Naboo's brother.
It's so funny.
Oh my
Naboo just like
gosh.
Get a belly.
disappeared behind the cloth, and then the Sid appeared with him just there. Just like, oh my
Oh my
god.
gosh, you've got Naboo.
They
Where is
want to escape. Is Gur.
Naboo?
No Gur.
Where's
So
Naboo, by the
He's
way?
been meowing. He's on the bed.
Do you want to bring him over?
They were hiding in the bathroom closet. I was like, "What are you doing?"
Oh bless. How many do you have?
Just 2. I've got Gur and then my old
Cute.
girl Bella, who's 14 now.
Oh wow.
Yeah, you're
Wow.
old. You're so old.
Oh, bless her.
Look at you. She has such a nice pattern on her face, so she's beautiful.
Oh, bless her. That's so sweet. Is she a tabby?
Tabby Maine Coon mix, actually.
Oh wow. Wow. Cool.
Which is Maine Coons are usually big. She was a runt, so she's like the smallest probably Maine
doesn't-
Coon mix of all time. And also her coat is not as like long and kind of thick. She's got a nice silky coat, which I think is more of a tabby trait. But like Maine Coons are like they get real messy. Like if you've ever seen like a bobcat or any kind of like almost like wildcat like that kind of fur. I've seen some Maine Coons that were just like roaming around. They're just like strays, and they have such wild fur. It's like it's something to behold. That's all I can say.
No, our cat is in like super defense mode on the
Yeah,
bed. If
he
I
doesn't
grab him,
wanna.
he'll
He
scream.
doesn't want to say hi.
Well,
They
yeah.
did not either. I just brought him over like, nope, fuck this. I'm done.
So yeah, that's pretty much all my thoughts on Tibetan Book of the Dead. And because it was only like 15 minutes left of the actual thing, and then it was kind of appendix and index
Appendix
for
and
the
index
rest of the
and
time.
prayers and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any thoughts from you? Any more thoughts from you guys on things? I guess for the last 20 minutes or so, we can talk about art that's like that we have that like sort of links to the themes that have inspired us in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I thought that would be a fun way to spend the last couple of minutes, and immediately Jacob's Ladder comes to mind. I'm still really I'm really disturbed by that movie. As much
It's
as I
very effective.
yeah,
Even though
as
it was
much as
based on an episode of the Twilight Zone, I think, or the Outer Limits, maybe.
yeah,
And
it's a
so it
great
didn't fit.
film, but I feel really uncomfortable every time I watch it.
Yeah.
Anytime I watch any film that tries to seriously grapple with the afterlife, I feel very kind of like uncomfortable.
Oh, one just occurred to me because I've been rewatching some Coen Brothers films. No Country for Old Men, which again, great novel and brilliantly told film. Just I can't think of the main character's name, and I just watched it like a week or 2 ago.
Anton Chigurh.
The main antagonist, Anton Chigurh, is I would say he's definitely a vengeful deity, who is just but also he's kind of like a chaotic force. But the main character, James Brolin's character, who is just he's tormented and he was just happened to be at the wrong place at the right time because he stumbles upon a large fortune, and then all of what befalls him and those close to him is just hell. And it's but I think that maybe it's just more of a through line with the author. Again, I haven't finished Blood Meridian because it's so like brutal. Like the first couple of chapters is so hard to get through because it's just so viscerally like disturbing.
Yeah, same here. Same here. I really want to like finish it and like get through it and stuff, but like yeah.
I have it queued up. There's another one that I was recently put onto. It was by I think it's Nathaniel Brown. That sounds interesting. Is that the? I have my Audible all queued up because I was listening to that. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, the summary that you had recommended. I was kind of re-listening to that. Raymond Chandler, The Big Sleep. which is kind of like that was, I don't remember when that was recommended to me recently, but that was, there's that. I'm trying to think. There was a really good work. I think that if we wanted to touch on any Lynch or any Jodo, I think that a lot of what fuels maybe a little bit of El Topo, but I think that the Dance of Reality, as the summation kind of brought up the dance a lot with the Bardo. That I think that he drew a lot upon that, just like I mean, but also the movie is more of a reflection of his like childhood growing up in Chile, I believe. But
Hmm.
the what he depicts on the screen is very like, I mean, it's like both horrific and beautiful. It's like, the ebb and flow of like drawing you into the beauty while, then exposing you to the horrors. Like it's very Bardo to me, but that's just, I mean, Jordo in general. Like you could pick out of a hat and you'd probably land on a pretty good representation,
Oh,
because
big
he's just so
time.
tapped in. Well, you brought
He,
up the Holy Mountain last week, obviously, the very end with like the
yeah,
Maya.
he's
Um,
super. He's super inspired by the Bardo Thodol, even in Holy Mountain. Like all of the trials and tribulations that the thieves, quote unquote, go through are inspired by, like, they confront greed, they confront ignorance, they confront all of the different sort of things, and then when they eventually get to the holy mountain they see that it's like an illusion in that sense, um and that they are the adepts that they've been searching for. It's sort of it's a similar kind of like journey in that sense. There's also this Jungian writer that I've been reading who sort of tells the story of what happens to Persephone while she's in the underworld, which I always thought was missing from that whole fiasco. It's always told from the perspective of her grieving mother Demeter or Hades or all the other humans whose lives have been thrown into chaos because Demeter is no longer making the world fertile. But this author decided to basically tell the story of what actually happens to Persephone in the underworld, and like how her descent makes her into a very powerful god, one more powerful than when she was just kind of this virginal child with her mother. And when she descends into the underworld, she learns magic from the dead. She learns secrets from the dead. She learns prophecy, because the underworld, the world of the unconscious, is like where magic lives. It's where treasure lives. It's where secrets live. It's where all the things that go into the ingredients box of magic live. So when she emerges from the underworld, she's not like a victim. She's somebody who's come up as a more powerful being. And she also emerges as a woman. She goes down as a child and she emerges like as a woman. Um, and I sort of saw that as like like a precursor to the Bardo Thodol, like a very ancient kind of story of like this feminine descent into the unconscious. Same thing with like the story of Inanna in the Babylonian canon as well. Her descent into the underworld also kind of mirrors the Bardo Thodol. Um, in the Aztec and Mayan stuff, there's also a heavy emphasis on the underworld and underworld myths. Um, it's a really fascinating area of study. Like I would highly recommend that everybody like just go and devour as much of it as possible and see where the synchronicity highway leads you,
mhm.
for
It makes
sure.
me, brings you back to Orpheus and is it
Hmm.
Eurydice? Like that was kind of a mirror of like the trials of Persephone had to go through, because Hades wanted to take her in because of her beauty and like her, she was a muse, she was a wood nymph, I believe. And Orpheus, against his best judgment, could not resist from looking back. It's just like it's the total duality of man. It's just like having this goal set up for you. I mean, we've talked about it before, right? You've talked about it on various podcasts, just about how like why boys like video games so much, and like having an objective. And he had an objective, but also he's so inspired, but his inspiration is ripped away from him by death itself, the embodiment of death, which is Hades, which is the and and he still can't resist. Like, he's like, I can have her back if I can't, but I can't stop. I need to see her. I need to know that she's still behind me, that she's still, with me. And in his hubris, it is all stripped away from him, which makes me think again of the Bardo, and why I think a lot of Greek tragedy and myths line up very closely with the Bardo. Which I'd love to dive back into some Greek, because Greek mythology is so ripe. It's
I
so
love it. It was my first love when it comes to mythology, and I think it will forever be my top love. I mean, I love other world mythologies, don't get me wrong, but because Greek mythology was sort of my gateway, I feel like it will always have a top spot. But
Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree, and yeah, even with the sort of parallel between the Persephone myth and like the Orpheus myth, the Jungian writer that I was referring to earlier compares it to the creative process, which is what you were talking about earlier. And she sort of she says Persephone kind of represents the genesis of like new ideas, new beginnings, the sort of first inspiration of creativity. Um, and when she's stolen away, Hades kind of represents like a complex in the psyche that has kind of carried off the creative impulse or urge, and we become like Demeter, weeping and trying to search for our Persephone when it's been taken away. And this relates to creativity, to joie de vivre. The idea is that we have an internal predator, a Hades, quote unquote, a Hades figure that is like kind of linked to the death drive, in the sense that it's a thing that innately wants to eat your potential. It wants to prevent you from growing. It wants to stagnate you. And ever so often, this thing will come and steal your Persephone away. And how, as much as the Persephone myth can be seen as a mirroring of the cycles of nature, it can also be seen as like the mirroring of like the cycles of creative processes in the psyche, and certain things that come and snatch our joie de vivre and our creative potential away. The voice of your inner critic is kind of can be seen as like a Hades in that sense. And I think that that really mirrors the wrathful deities in a sense that we confront in the Bardo. We're told that they're reflections of our own mind. Um, and this is true in life, just as it is in death, in the sort of death process in the Bardo. In life, we also have to contend with our internal wrathful deities, with our own Hades figures that steal our joy and our springtime and our creativity and our inspiration like away, which I thought was like really interesting. Yeah, Jay George, sorry.
I'm thinking about John Coltrane right now, especially his work. His work starting from "I Love Supreme" until the time he dies. He was only 42 years old. He died of cancer. Because his music, he was already extremely accomplished. He was successful. He had extremely proficient at saxophone and all. But when I Love Supreme, he got really deep into sort of like really trying to know himself spiritually, trying to know his world spiritually. He studied music and the connections between music and all types of spiritual practice from everywhere in the world. And that led him to create some really beautiful stuff, or some really scary stuff too. So like free jazz inspired stuff. But I think that kind of reflects like what's trying to find your soul in like this crazy fucking modernity is sort of about. It's gonna be beautiful. It's gonna be scary, but you got to keep a clear mind. But not try to judge it too much.
Exactly. And that those are the two sort of qualities that we're told to cultivate at the end of the Bardo Thodol, is to avoid being repulsed or attracted to the muck of samsara. Just sort of cultivate that detachment and like, accept things as they are, which I think is good psychological advice. Good spiritual advice for sure. But yeah, it's been fun reading this. I can't wait for us to dive into whatever next material the universe brings our way next.
Yeah, we'll have a think about it and put it in the Discord, obviously, as soon as we've sort of decided on a list. But we'll probably keep it as a narrow list this time. And
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
just we'll go with that. J. George, I feel like I want to give you an extra 5 votes because you came to every session of book club for this one.
Nah, don't need that. Nah, let's keep it fair. Let's keep it fair.
Well, yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. It's been a joy and
has
a
been.
wonderful journey, and we will catch you later. Goodbye.
Nice one.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Yeah, bye.
Good night.